Stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
So our speaker today is Frank Conn. He retired from the Army and moved up here to be with his 16-member family. So he's going to talk to us about combat surgery in Afghanistan. So Frank, take it over.
Turn off cell phones.
Yeah, turn off your cell phones if you would, please.
18 guests.
Oh, 18 guests. So there's 18 of you here. That's good. It's a Conn day. Okay, there you go.
Is this okay? All right. What I'm going to do is try to give you some insight into the preparation of a combat surgeon, what was necessary in the preparation, and then for you to get some idea of what we did in Afghanistan in the spring and summer of 2002. Some of this material is a little raw. Sometimes my language gets that way too. I mean no disrespect, but it was the way it was. I was born in Homewood, Brushton, not exactly one of the leafy suburbs of Pittsburgh. And my dad was a fireman. We had 6 kids. And so when it came to go to college, it was up to me. And so I went into the Army instead. I was an E1 when I went in, sergeant when I came out. I was able to take night school when I was there, and I had the GI Bill afterwards. The GI Bill got me through until I got into medical school. Medical school is very expensive. I got through in 3 years. My first year was on me. The Army then had a plan that if you gave them year to year, they would give you your tuition, your books, your instruments. They would also give you a stipend, and they may be an officer. I didn't even know what the hell an officer was, and all of a sudden I was a captain. I had to give them a year back, so I had to give them 2 years. And so after I was through with medical school, they sent me to Walter Reed. Walter Reed at this time is here. That's the old Walter Reed. 1909, it was constructed 7 years after Major Walter Reed died of appendicitis. He was the one that, as a medical corps officer, said that yellow fever was caused by the mosquito. And so through the years, it became famous because it was close to DC. And all the people in Congress and the presidents who wanted to be treated for free went there. And it got bigger and bigger, so that by World War II, it had 3,500 patients there. They had them in the porches. They had them anywhere they could fit them. By the 1970s, it was seen that it was too old, too small. So they built that. That's the new Walter Reed. It had 1,200 beds. If you walked around there, that was a quarter mile. It's huge. And just to give you an idea how things have changed, 30 years after this they had the Naval at Bethesda. If you put those 2 hospitals together, they had about 1,600, 1,700 beds. Today, this is all gone. They've combined it with Bethesda. It's 250 beds. That's how medicine has changed with the scoping and getting you out fast and so forth. So it's a big deal. So when I went there, this was like playing the palace. I remember when I was an intern, I hadn't been there long enough to know where the bathrooms were. And we used to get Big Red every night would come in from patients all over the world that had tough stuff. And I was an intern there, and I was taking the intern histories and physicals. And there was a sergeant that came in that had end-stage cancer. He didn't have long to live. He looked up at me and he says, "Thank God I'm at Walter Reed." And I said to him, "You're absolutely right. We have 800 physicians here. We have the National Cancer Institute. We also have the NIH, the Institute of Health. Up the road, we have Johns Hopkins." I said, "You're going to get the best care you can." I was one of 50 interns. The place was huge. You were never alone. There was always someone there to give you a hand. We had all of the kinds of specialists that you could think of. Plus, many of the people like DeBakey and Cooley that would come by because back in the days before 1973, they were drafted. And they felt that they should come by and help us out, which they did. So I was there for 5 years. Our children were born in these institutions. And when I was done there after my 5 years, they sent me to Fort Polk. For those of you who don't know where Fort Polk is, imagine you're standing in front of a map of the United States. Close your eyes and take an enema plunger, and it'll go right there. 200,000 acres of swamps, mosquitoes, and so forth. And what we did was we went from that to this. You put those things together, and that's a hospital. And let me see if I can get this thing right here. And it was called hospital, but it was important. Had some prestige in itself. If you've watched the movie Patton, at the very beginning, Patton is staying in attention as they're playing retreat. At the end, he gave a talk that I cannot repeat to this refined audience that I have here. But at the end, he said, "What are you going to do when the war is over? Are you going to have your grandson say, 'I killed Germans,' or 'you shoveled shit in Louisiana'?" That's what he was talking about. After World War I, they closed that down. And the animals came in and used it as their private latrine. So as it was re-upped again in 1942, they had to shovel it out. And so this place was an amazing thing. We would do colectomies and so forth, and we'd have to take the patients outside in order for them to get to the next part of the hospital. I then invited some of my professors from Walter Reed, said, "You sent me here." So I had one of them do rounds, and he stopped because there was some kind of a snake or so forth that was dying here. And he had everyone go around and take a look at it. And then to see how you were alone, there were only 2 general surgeons there, so we were on every other night. And the other surgeon was gone, and an older surgeon came up who was a full colonel, and he was from New Orleans. He says, "Could I take your call tonight?" I almost hugged him. I said, "Sure." So the next morning, I'm going in before rounds. I'm looking at the x-rays. There's x-rays of a small girl, and she has a safety pin that she had swallowed with a pointed edge right towards her heart. Now, your heart is approximately the size of your fist. So you can imagine a 2 or 3-year-old, the heart is about the size of an egg. I kept looking around there and hoping, since she was admitted 12 hours before, that I'd see a post-op film. It wasn't there. So I went to the pediatric floor, and there she was with her mom and dad there just sitting up watching. She could have coughed and died. And I said to them, I said, "We have to operate now." And as I'm going back to them, I'm saying, what am I going to do? We didn't have scopes then. There was no one else around. As they used to say, if you're looking for a helping hand, look at the end of your arm. And should I use a Lepsky knife and take her sternum apart? And I'm thinking about this. You're really feeling alone. Just then they call a code. And of course she coded. So I'm back there, and there's a covering of the heart called the pericardium. I said, she's bled, I'll bet you, into that space between the heart and the pericardium. So I took a needle, I went in, do a pericardiocentesis, she still died. I looked around, and I finally saw the surgeon over there just sitting there with his head down, and she's dead. Now, we have what they call day rooms at the end there, and that's where Mom and Dad were. And he wasn't budging. I had to go up there. And I said, we lost her. The father was a powerful guy. He kept throwing furniture around. The mother took her arm, and she wanted to break through the window and kill herself. I'm holding on to her, tears all around. To this day, I can see her x-ray. Every once in a while, I'll wake up. That's emotional baggage that you carry with her. Later on that day, I autopsied her along with the pathologist. And the right ventricle, even in an adult, you can put your finger through. It's thin because it just pumps blood into a very low resistance lung, not out to the rest of the body. And the needle had just gone in there and jabbed again and again, and she bled out. So those are things that you don't forget, and you forget that you're not at a place with 800 physicians anymore. I had a pediatric surgeon from Walter Reed came in. I saved him 4 pediatric hernias to do. And he's doing this thing, and he's looking around, and he says, when can I get out of here? And I got him a helicopter to get out, and it was all yellow. And he said, why is it all yellow? I said, because if it goes down in the swamps, we want to get you before the gators do. That was the last Walter Reed we saw. So after that, we did have camaraderie. It was kind of us against the world. So we liked that. And I got out of the Army, but I missed the camaraderie. So I got back into the reserves. And the reserves would send me to difficult places, because for my 2 weeks, they sent me to Fort Drum with the Mountain Division. They're all cold weather. When I got there, they gave me what we called Mickey Mouse boots, because your feet would freeze just regular boots. So I did a couple appendectomies there and so forth. Thank God for global warming, or I'd have frozen my butt off up there. One of my favorite places that I went to was Benning. I don't know the names of what they call them now. They've taken them away, and they've given them, politically correct names. It was Benning. I love Benning. And when I got there, I wanted the permanent party to show me around. And they have the jump school there. So they have these towers, and they jump them down. And what they said is, we teach them that after 16 feet, there's no, it's the same as 16,000 feet. We get them used to it. So I'll take your word for it. Then they took me to Ranger School. Ranger School was something else. They showed me in the woods that they had a bunch of tables, each one 1 foot bigger than the other. And they said, get up and get down. Well, you got to have pretty sure of yourself to do that kind of stuff. But they will, you're not faint of heart when you go there. And then they had all these, remember some of you guys in the ladders you had to go through, the horizontal ladders? Well, they would sweeten the pot a little bit, because after they were done, they'd have the company around and they would urinate in the middle of it. Just to give you an idea, maybe you shouldn't fall off the ladders, to give you incentive to complete it. And then just when you think you couldn't have any more fun, then they would put you into last man standing. They put the whole bunch up there, and you beat the crap out of each other. And the guy that last got a 48-hour leave from that place. And then they had the sniper school there. And they said, 1 shot, 1 kill. Don't run, you'll just die tired. There was so much damn testosterone there, I had to shave 3 times a day. I've never seen anything like this. Then what they would do, they would say, okay, let's try something else. And they would say, let's make a field hospital from nothing. We'll get the field engineers there, and we'll get a bunch of compressed air, and we will blow it out of nothing. And that's where your water was. You have to dig. The engineers would tell us what to do, and you would have these pipes that would come up there. And that's where they could put the compressed air. The air could be cooled. And we were in tents, but you lived in these. You operated in the field. You ate there, you prayed there, you had exercises there. Now these things are no good if you're in combat, because all it takes is a couple rifle shots. There's like a balloon came down on you. But as far as this was concerned, this was something new. And if there's an Ebola outbreak, if there's flooding or something, you can go into a field and make a field hospital out of this. And of course, we screwed around because we were pretending we were Congress. It's your money, what the hell? And we would have, this is a moulage expert that would have people come in and they'd have stuff sticking out of them and so forth. And so this is what I did there. Then Saddam Hussein had killed 15,000 people with poison gas. He used mustard gas, sometimes he used sarin and so forth. So then I went to the Combat Casualty Care course. They're serious at that thing. So the first thing they do is put you in mop gear. Hated that stuff. It's all cotton and they put linings in it so that things can't get through. Charcoal, really heavy. Then they put a protective mask on there, and they were so nice that they even put my glasses inside there. And they would be throwing this stuff at you all the time, and you had to put it on. And what they did was they would have the field hospital, and it would have different sensors there. They have a dosimeter if it's radiology. They would have something if it's going to be bacterial. And I asked the guy, I said, if I have to relieve myself, how am I going to do this? He says, well, you can drop it, but then have someone else wipe you off. And I said, I don't know anyone that well. I don't want to be on either end of that. So that's what, and then they made us so that we had to qualify on 45s and 9 millimeters. The Beretta was coming into action at that time. And so what I did was we would go to the, instead of having these, ours were only 25 meters. That's 82 feet. I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And I said to the guy, what's wrong? He says, well, this is a 9 millimeter. It has 15 rounds and it's heavy. And he said, you know what? He says, if that moves a quarter of an inch, you miss the target. So then I used both hands, and I got a little bit better. And I decided right then and there, I wasn't going to shoot anyone unless they were 15, 16 feet away, hopefully looking around at someone else. There. I just didn't have it. Then they put us through obstacle courses. Stupid me, I grabbed near the head. Don't ever do, grab the feet. It's a lot lighter. I'm running around, and then, of course, at the end, they had, you're only 18 inches off the ground, they had barbed wire. So we're heisting this guy through who was heavy. And then they threw gas at us. Now we have to put gas mask on him first because he's strapped in, it'll kill him. So we do that, then we put it on ourselves. It was terrible. I had never felt that bad in my life. But I was going to feel worse. Because I was old, there I am in the back, they put me in with a bunch of women. They figured they're all safe. So the same guy who's telling me how to fire comes around, he says, I was a major at the time, said, get someone to get all the weapons and get them to clean them. So right here, oops, where the hell am I now? I had a nurse that was there, right there, and she had her weapon in her hand going like this, and she said, I missed every target. I broke a nail. Bad hair day. And I'm having my period. She looked at me with intent to kill. If I would have asked her to get the weapons and clean them, she wouldn't have missed that target. She'd have blown me to hell, and she'd have slept like a baby. I took all of those things, and I cleaned them myself. I had palpitations for 2 days because that's the closest I ever came in my life to dying, right there. So soon after that, I got a call that we're going to Afghanistan. Now, I belonged to a group that was down in Georgia, and so they said, you're kind of old, and you have an artificial hip. Do you want to go? I said, sure, I'll go. And since I let her go, I still had a pulse. That's all they wanted. they wanted a general surgeon who had a pulse. So I went to SRP, which is Soldier Preparative Training, and they were serious there. They gave me my desert uniform, and they gave me my very own flak jacket, and it had porcelain in the front, weighed 22 pounds. I didn't like that. And then they gave me dog tags that were muffled on the outside. I said, why? I said, well, you don't want the enemy to know. And I was getting the idea that this was going to be serious. Then they gave me my very own Beretta that I had with 45 rounds. And we would get a series of people coming in to talk. And he says, now you guys are used to Saturday night specials. He says they're going 6, 7, maybe 800 feet per second. He says the projectiles that you're going to be going are 25 to 3,500 feet a second. He says, and they will kill by lacerating, that's what they do, cavitating, and then they'll also cause just shock waves. And then he went in and gave us, he says, now, there's also something called yaw, and as the round leaves, it begins to wiggle back and forth. And he says, as it does that, and before it straightens out, it accentuates all those things. So he told us of a guy who was shot, had little burn marks here of a 45. His back was completely blown out. So he said, what you're going to have to do, he says, where the bullet is probably not where it entered. So try to get some idea of where it is by the X-ray if you can, and then see what's in the middle to do that. Then we had an Air Force general come, and he said, you know what, you're not going to need your mop gear. I almost hugged him. And he said, because it takes a state to have all of the mustard gas, the plague, and things like that has been used. These people are guerrilla fighters. He says they're not going to have that. He says, and then we've also made a sign. He says, back in 1991, when we were making big gains, Saddam Hussein's people said, we're going to start to use gas on your troops. Now, they'd already had masks on because they were burning all of their gas lines. And so we sent them a message and said, if you do, this is the weather report for Baghdad tomorrow. Partly cloudy and 36,000 degrees. Because they had, if you use that against us, we consider that to be a nuclear weapon. So this is at least some good thing. So then after that, someone came, he said, we're separating you. They need someone in the 1980th Forward Surgical Team. They need a general surgeon. And I said, well, where are they? And they said, well, they're based in San Francisco. I'll backfill there. I said, but they're not in San Francisco. They're in Kandahar. Geography, never something I studied much, but I knew that wasn't in Northern California. And so they put me on a series of planes, and I ended up in Oman, and they put me in a C-130. I was the only one on it except for gear that they had. And as we're flying in, they're closing off all their lights. And they're saying, we're going to make a very sharp turn to get you down. I said, why? He says, because they shoot at us if we take a laser. I said, well, that's not very sporty. I'm a doctor. Didn't care. So when I got off, I noticed it was nighttime. It was really, really hot. And I got off, and I could see my breath, and it wasn't as if it was cold. That was sand. It's like talcum powder there. And that gets in every orifice that you have. And they said, okay, go to bed. They gave me a rack so that I could go to bed. And the next morning, I was at Kandahar International Airport. You know, it was really hot. I was with the 101st, which is a storied group. They are the Rakusans. That's how you see that in the middle. It means, in Japanese, the umbrella soldiers, because they wanted to have a show of force. And so MacArthur wanted the whole division to jump. And so the Japanese people called them the umbrella soldiers. These are also the battling bastards of Bastogne they held out. So this is a very storied group, and they didn't let me down. They were just excellent. The guy that was going around says, you will carry your weapon at all times. He said, you're going to be walking the place that 7 or 8 months ago was the headquarters of Osama bin Laden. So that's where it is. And he says, it's all contested around here. Anything outside the wire is dangerous, and maybe even inside the wire. And he was right. Everyone was kind of tense 2 weeks later, 3 Canadians were killed with friendly fire because they're not wearing different uniforms. We knew they had spies inside there, so it was a bad scene. And he said, there's no running water here. The electricity is spotty. We have a couple places where there's air conditioning. Other than that, that's what it is. And I said to him, why am I here? He said, well, we needed a surgeon. The forward surgical team has 4 surgeons. We only have 3. I said, was the other guy shot? He says, no. He was found having sex with 2 nurses simultaneously. I said, I've been married to 1 nurse for 53 years, and I'll be damned if I can keep up with her. He had 2. And I said to the guy, I said, you know, that's on some doctor's bucket list. And he said, not in the Army, that's bad for morale. I bet his morale was pretty good. And he was back in San Francisco, and I was sweating in a tent. So I resented that, but that's why I was there. That's the Rakazan. That's the, we were able to use part of the airport, even though it had been damaged, for our hospital. So we had some cover, some containment. We lived in tents, but it was in there. And we were at the Kandahar Institute of Surgical Science. That's the 1980th Forward Surgical Team. And this is the group. Now this girl is interesting because she's a nurse that was born in Afghanistan. She spoke Pashto, which is a very difficult language. That's what the Special Forces told me anyway. And she used to go out and take care of some of the women. We weren't allowed to touch them. But the northern tribes came in, and the northern tribes are supposedly our friend. Well, they looked at her and they went berserk. They said, what are you doing without a burqa? What do you have, a weapon? And she understood everything he was saying. And she took out her weapon and she pointed to it and she said, U.S. Army. They left and they put a $40,000 price tag on her so she could never go outside the wire again there. But that was our team. It changed now and then. They put surgeons here, surgeons there. And we had to give, we taught. And I was humbled there because all the people, the doctors that I had spoken to were all better trained than I was. There was a vascular surgeon there. That means 2-year fellowship. Our head surgeon was from Salt Lake City, but he trained here with Thomas Starzl. He was a transplant surgeon. And he was very good because he knew the medical side of it too. Another guy, Colonel Wu, was actually the head of gastrointestinal surgery at Cleveland Clinic. It was an honor to be with them. I don't know if I could teach them anything at all, but these were the people that I got to talk to. And then this was my quarters there. Not exactly the Four Seasons. It's really hot there. And we learned to do things to try to keep ourselves from getting hurt. We use pyrethrin every day on our uniforms, and we use DEET on us. And we had a assortment of funny things there. We had spiders that were as big as your hand. They were called huntsman spiders. And they're not supposed to be venomous, but one of ours got bitten. He sloughed the whole side of his thigh off. We had to send him back to get his skin grafts. Then we had the Afghani carpet viper. These are beautiful. No known, you couldn't put crotolin on them. They didn't have any type of thing that could neutralize it at all. And what they do is they're vicious. They come after you because what will happen is the guy will get some cookies, he'll leave crumbs, they get these ugly looking rats who come through, and then the snake would come after the rats. Well, one of the snakes happened to be in our day room. It cleared out. You couldn't imagine how fast it was. And then in came the goofy veterinarians. We had veterinarians there because they had to look at our meat that we ate and so forth. And so they captured it, and they used it as a pet. They would feed things to it. And fortunately, after a couple of weeks, they let it go out in the desert because I could just see one of these crazy sons of a bitch. He'll take it home. And he'll say, look what I bought from Afghanistan. Hey, honey, you know that mice problem you were having? Go get them. That's the last thing. So what they would do, there are a lot of ways to die over there. I would go from point A to B, and one time I went in a helicopter. Now, I've been in my share of medevacs. You can't hear in a medevac. You can't. So if you got to intubate someone, put chest tubes in them, put IVs, you do it before. So I was in there, and the guys are sitting on their helmets. I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "They pounded on the floor." I said, this is sheet metal. He says, "If they fire even an AK-47, it's going to go right through there and blow off your balls." I said, "Come on, man." I said, "That's a wives' tale," as I took off my helmet and I sat on it. You had to worry about the heat. The Israelis told us that you have to pee clear because it was 110 to 130 degrees. The humidity was only 7%. Didn't know. We had 2-liter canteens, and I drank one of them all the way down. You just didn't know. They told the story of an entire Egyptian squadron of tanks waiting to ambush. Well, they didn't have air conditioning. It must have been 200. They all died. 3 of them got out and got underneath to get out of the shade, went to sleep, but that night the sands compressed, and they had 62 tons and killed them all. So we had to tell these people, gee, drink, drink, drink. In the Israeli army, if you don't pee clear, they watch you, you're court-martialed. So the next thing is, you're never going to see this, you'll thank me for this, your colon is your battle buddy. You do not want to have turds that are rabbits, and you don't want to have turds that are soupy. You want to have a Bristol 3, 4, something like this. That's what you need. And so you had I don't know who Bristol was, that he was so concerned with keeping a log of your logs. But this isn't bad for you guys. You should all have a Bristol 3 or 4, even now, so you're welcome for this. We gave us around to all the troops. And then, this was a slit trench. They would call it that you had to put your battle rattle on. And you had to put on your helmet liner, put that 22 pounds around you, and jump into this. Now, we would get mortared, but we wouldn't get mortared but one time, because we had stuff that could triangulate where it was coming from, and we send out guys to kill them. And so what they did was, after a while, we'd only get one mortar. They put on a timer, then they'd run away. I wasn't going to go in there. I don't think I could fit. But that had what they called those slit trenches. I gave you then that gold one. That was my favorite place to go. I tried the middle one once, but I swore something was moving down there. It locked up every sphincter I had for 2 days. So I would use that. And as my wife will attest, I do not suffer in silence. I took bitching to, I guess, an art form. So I was there waiting, because you had to wait for everything. Had to wait to go in. And wouldn't you know, along came a little Spec 4, a girl. Now, she worked on the helicopter line. I had a little M9 with her. She had an M16 with 100 rounds of ammunition, and she was carrying something because she was having her period. Now, this is filthy area, completely Spartan, and I felt ashamed. I didn't bitch for 45, 50 minutes after that. And then I thought about it. Right now, 15% of the Army is women. Couldn't do without them. Now, back in those days, it wasn't as much because they didn't have the military occupational specialties to go into everything. Except for the medical people, all the women were airborne qualified. But what happened if they got a breast mass? What happened if they had dysfunctional uterine bleeding, or endometriosis, or all the things that young women can get? We had no one there for them. I was amazed and just completely in awe of those women, of how they had to carry on in very Spartan ways. Now, these are just the trees. That's a landmine up there, and that's a Russian one. They were all around. We had a 3-legged dog that we called Skippy, and we used to call him the bomb-sniffing dog, and his motto was, "I'm right most of the time." And over there, you'll see that they have, they can spot incoming rounds. This was the Marines were there before us, and they used 50 caliber. You can tear apart houses with those things that they had. And these are some of the Russian planes that have been knocked down. I wanted to go in them, but the Marines used them as latrines. We even put a latrine up there, but they still use them for that. But you see these things all around there because we had given the Taliban the surface-to-air missiles that they used to take this down. This is a mosque that they had. It was completely bullet-ridden that was there. We decided that we were going to go out and do something for the community. The Taliban didn't like it. They ambushed us, and they shot one of our nurses. We took an AK-47 round out of his ankle. It's a lot like our 7.62 millimeter. It doesn't go as fast. It's not packed as fast. It goes about 2,400 feet per second, but it messed up his ankle. They sent him back. He'll limp for the rest of his life, but he has a medal. And this is the NCOIC of our, these are medics that are there. This is what we use to resuscitate. This was the resuscitator. We use saline most of the time. We had 30 units of O negative that we could give. I only used that a couple times. This has undergone a lot of research. Now, do you use platelets? So we had packed cells, and we had this. When people would come in and they were in shock and so forth, before we took them to the operating room, if possible, we took them in there. This is where we had the packed cells. It was one of the only refrigerators on there. And this was our OR. Now, we operate right next to each other. You wouldn't do that in the States because of cross-contamination. But these were young bucks most of the time, and you did what you did in there. So we operated right next to each other. This is the C-130. Now, the C-130 is a workhorse. It's old. But what will happen is that it can take off and land at very short distances. Plus, it can do it. It doesn't need anything that's paved. A jet has to have pay because the intake valve, if you get a lot of stones in there, it's out of commission. Not so this one. About a week after this, one of the C-130s was taking off, and they have a loadmaster who didn't do his job, and it broke in half. Killed most of the people that were on it, and the other people were filled with JP-4 fuel, so we got them ready and sent them back to Fort Sam Houston, which is the burn center. This is where I started to have a lot of respect for the people who were in mortuary affairs, because they went out to that debris field. That debris field happened to be in enemy territory. And they get the bodies, and the one body didn't have an arm. And for hours, they took rakes until they found that arm. They brought them back, they clean them up, they get all their material that they can. They found out that he was married. They searched down where his wedding ring went. He was just recently married, so he had given the ring to someone else for safekeeping. They put them in the morgue, and after they went in the morgue, a plane would come and take them to Dover Air Force Base. They used to autopsy them. Now they just CAT scan them to see how they died. These over there are the caskets. They're 6 feet 6 inches long, 3 feet wide. We see them go up and down material depending upon how many died. This is the fellow who was Sorensen. He was our the head surgeon. Even though he did not have the rank, he was the best surgeon. The other fellow is a Indian, came to the United States, was a full colonel. He was a vascular surgeon. Unfortunately, the Afghans had a wedding party, and at the end they fired their guns in the air, just as one of those C-130s was going over. It, unfortunately, was one that was a gunship, and it had 2 or 3 of the rotary cannon on it, and it just completely wiped out a lot of people. CCAT teams came in. These were Air Force. They brought the remainders in. And so Dr. Sorensen was triaged. He said to me, "You have that one." And I had a 4-year-old girl. I've had 4-year-old girls I have them now as grandkids. And it was a sight to see because as she came in, she was breathing, but the right side of her skull was gone, and most of it was on her belly, and brain tissue was on her chest. Like this? Is that better? So I didn't know what to do. I never had brain surgery before. So we started an IV. We gave her Rocephin, which we used to call gorillicillin, and we gave her some oxygen. And, you know, she was breathing on her own. Her circulation was okay, but she was bleeding. So what I did was I began to operate on her brain. You don't have to, the brain does not have any sensory that you can operate right on it. So I was debriding the dead stuff. I couldn't put back the brain tissue because it's dead. It would just pus out. So I was putting them back together again, as best I could anyway, to skull. And I was wrapping her up, and they said, Colonel, you're needed in the next room. And it could have been her sister, another 3 or 4-year-old kid. She had no subcutaneous fat. She was skinny. She was hit with fragmentation wounds all in her belly. And she was bleeding everywhere, and I was helping the vascular surgeon. At the end, we do something called we run the bowel. We take our fingers up the diaphragm, we go all the way down, feeling. And I said, there's things moving there. He says, yes, they are Ascaris worms. And I said, how are we expecting this kid to heal? He's so skinny now with these worms. I'm going to cut him out. He says, you don't do that. Now, we have a bendazole in the United States. You give that to them, and the worms are not able to take care of glucose. They fall out. They don't have them there. And I said, well, I'll cut them out. He says, you can't do that because they'll poop their eggs all over her peritoneum. She'll be dead in a half hour. So I said, well, what do you guys do? He says, we do nothing. We feed them by vein and put milk in the mouth, and they'll go up there and pull them out. And I said, man, I'm back in the 12th century. So what I did was we closed them up, and we got them ready, and a place came and took them to Kabul, which was 232 miles that way. And there is a Bagram Air Force Base there. They have a lot more. So we got room, and they got there in a couple hours. A couple hours later, we heard that both of them were dead. Now, you grow a hide on you, and it's something that you have to do. You're probably inappropriate. But this time, you know, there was just a pall over the place. This is the stuff that you're not going to forget. 2 little girls at the wrong place at the wrong time in a war that accomplished nothing. It was terrible. Still to this day, I think about that. They had bad luck. Then I had a guy from the 82nd Airborne who was up on top of his Humvee and he was hit by a sniper, and the bullet caught up in his helmet, caught there. Talk about luck. I saw him. He wanted to go back to duty the next day. Perfectly fine. He had concussion that night. He said, I want to go back. I want to light up those MFers, sir. I said, wow. And so this, you're at the right place at the right time. They sent his helmet back to the 82nd Airborne Museum. These are the big Chinooks. They're the biggest tactical helicopter we have. They're over 7 feet wide. The word got around that we were going to try to make this a mobile hospital. And the Taliban told us, said, go ahead, because they're easy to shoot down, and we know that you'll come to get those. So we scotched that idea. They were just all around. We had a prison there for the Taliban. I took care of a couple of them. It was just, I just wanted to show you the size of those things. And then lots of times you did nothing. We actually got meat one time because someone came from Outback and gave us meat. And of course, then we just learned different skills. One week I was a barber. I didn't know it, but no one would care there. And so this is what we did. Then this is another thing we did. We kept the Taliban frozen because there was a $50 million reward to get Osama bin Laden. We thought he was still around. So we would take the Taliban in there, and we would freeze them. And then they said the people from the government would come around and take out their vitreous humor because the DNA that was there would not go bad in the sun. And so this is what they did. And so what we did is we used to get milk. It was warm. They radiated it It had all kinds of Arabic script on it. I wonder what it said. But what we would do is we would put the milk on top of the dead Taliban, and then it would turn into ice milk. And then that night, we would be up on top of the mill van looking at the mountains, and we'd say, "Who's living large now?" as we would chaw into the milk. And then I thought, you know, a couple months ago, we were real people. We had ice cubes. We could actually pee in the toilet. No one was trying to kill us. And here we are eating this ice milk that we froze on top of the dead Taliban. And we're barbarians with an education. That's what we are. But that's funny how fast that veneer gets stripped away when you're there. So finally, we got the idea that our replacements were coming. And when our replacements were coming, we're starting to get goofy. I think I'm Butch Cassidy and the Sundance. I said, what would happen if I saw that in half? Now, my replacement was a woman. And she was going to be there for 12 months. She had given birth to her daughter 4 months before. And those days, you could get a telephone link up if you were lucky. That's all. And I felt so sorry for her, but I felt so respect for someone who did their duty compared to my predecessor, who did his duty in a different way. So she was there, and we gradually, again, I got called out by Singular, and I went on a C-17. These are huge. And they were going to take me back to Rhine-Main. We were going to go over a lot of territory now that we couldn't go over, such as Russia. And so we had an 18-wheeler in there that was going back to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And that was a loadmaster there who I have a lot of respect for now. And they said, would you like to come up to the cockpit? I said, hell yeah. So I was up there. I thought I was Captain Video. And I said, you are now over Russia. And I said, pilot to bombardier, pilot to bombardier. I had all these. Then I made a mistake. And I said to the good pilot, this thing costs $440 million. That's an awful lot of money. He said, watch this. Never hear the words, watch this. That's usually not good. And so he flicked a switch that says, a missile has been fired. A missile has been fired. Immediately, we started to go into these wigwags up and down, and they put off chaff. And they said some of these things that are coming up are radar. And so we wanted to make sure that we confused them. And he says, now I can put this plane into a 60-degree dive. And I said, sir, I wish you wouldn't. I said, there's an 18-wheeler there. And the last thing I wanted to do is to come through the cockpit, and I rode that down to 32,000 feet over Russia. So don't need to do, so he didn't. And then I got off at Rhine-Main Air Force Base, Frankfurt am Main, and I couldn't tell you how glad I was. They did me, they gave me a debriefing, and then I got to go to the PX. I ordered the biggest pizza I could have, and a gallon of Pepsi that had 500 ice cubes in it. And I crunched them all. I said, this is wonderful. But then I thought, as glad as I am to be out of there, I was happy and honored to have been there. As far as the medical people were concerned, these people were smart, they were brave, they also did their duty, they were patriotic. And the same thing went for the soldiers of the 82nd Airborne and 101st. Can't speak too highly of them. They weren't allowed to smoke. They weren't allowed to drink. They weren't allowed to use tobacco. They couldn't show the bottom of their feet. There were all these rules and regulations. They did them all. And I think not only was I honored, I think that what they did is they upheld taxpayers, what you expect of them. And I think that they certainly did their job. So thank you. That's it. Any questions? Okay.
Any questions?
Sir.
Patrick Hodge, United States Air Force, retired, like yourself, mostly a reservist active duty person. Sir, what I ask every veteran brother and sister, are you using the VA if you think you can benefit from it?
No.
Wrong answer, sir.
The reason I don't is I was in the emergency room after I gave up surgery. And I was in North Carolina, in Smithfield, and we would get veterans in. Now, I would call the doctors in the VA, none of whom over 10 years ever had English as their first language. And they would make me go through the hoops. Did you get a CBC? Did you do this? Did you do that? In 10 years, I never had one of them except my patients. They said, keep them there. As long as I kept them there, the VA would pay. Now, this, again, is 15 years ago. Maybe it got better.
It did, sir.
Yeah. But the way it was right then. Now, you know, these guys are foreigners. They're getting paid $115,000, $120,000 a year. If they spoke English and they were on the outside, that would be, you know, they're making twice that. So I understand that. And I know that we had people that were on the waiting list for a long period of time. So I have to say, in my own experience, which ended 10, 11 years ago, I do not use the VA at all.
My granddaughter, my granddaughter is a forensic scientist at Dover that identifies the members that are coming back. I was curious as to, you were saying that they sent the bodies back to Dover. Did they embalm them, or did they just put them in ice?
That's
or
a good
whatever
question.
They do?
They were in ice until that time, and then they usually embalmed them there. I did not see the people in, they used to be called grave registration, now it's mortuary affairs. I never saw anyone do embalming. They froze them. And usually they weren't there long. They would have a C-130 come in and then take them and then start their hops over to the Germany, and then from Germany they went to Dover. It was at Dover that they were received. I think that's where they were embalmed after they were CAT scanned. They CAT scanned them, especially in Iraq, because they were using the improvised devices there, and they wanted to see how could we up-armor our vehicles, and they saw where these people were a lot of ways injured, so they could try to minimize that.
Doctor, getting back to that VA, last week I read an article where there's a controversy at Walter Reed that the politicians, high-ranking service members, their families were circumventing the line for treatment in the Walter Reed, and especially in pharmacy, where they would get their drugs before people that really needed them. There was a big controversy on that. Did you encounter that when you were at Walter Reed?
Absolutely. There was up at Walter Reed called the Gold Coast, and I couldn't go up there except when the staff didn't know how to do things. They didn't put nasogastric tubes down people. They didn't start difficult IVs. They're used to doing the big stuff. So I'd go up there in a special elevator, and they would say, see that? That's a picture there that Winston Churchill painted of Dwight Eisenhower, and it was very, very plush. You'd see a lot of the people who were diplomats there who wanted to get transplanted kidneys, and they were up there. So absolutely, that's what they did then. That's what they do now.
My next question, when you have a serious injury, would you send them to land school before you send them back to the States?
They wouldn't make it.
Wouldn't make it?
No. So what we did was, our job, when you're talking about combat surgery, it's try to stabilize so that you could send. When they went to Bagram Air Force Base, which is 22 or 23 miles away from Kabul, they had CAT scans there. They had most of the people that could take them, even more. If they were going to go for long periods of time with burns and so forth, then they went back to continental United States.
Doc, I just wanted to make a statement. Okay, in 1964, I was stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana for training. And us Yankees had one saying that we told all our Southern friends. It's too bad during the Civil War they didn't have the atomic bomb. This would have been a wonderful place to drop it.
Could have started. And I was there mostly with surgeons who were Southern. I got stuck down there. So they said, we're going to have a party. And in this party, everyone's going to dress up the way they did for the Civil War. And I said, you expect me to dress up like those losers? Silence. And they said, well, you can come just as you want, Yankee. Didn't make that party.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Frank.
Thank you for your attention.
Very, very
Okay,
good.
take care.